This paid podcast is produced by Slate Studios and ServiceNow. All uses of trademarks or brands are not meant to convey sponsorship or affiliation of this podcast.
I think you do lead differently in a crisis. You optimize risk rather than probably mitigating risk. Crisis management helps you deliver things in a different way.
Hey, everybody. From ServiceNow, this is Let's Workflow It, a podcast about the workflow revolution. I'm Catherine Minshew, founder and CEO of The Muse.
And I'm Alan Marks, Chief Marketing Officer of ServiceNow.
In every episode, we're going to pull back the curtain on how businesses today are driving transformation and growth with digital workflows. It's obvious that everything about the way we work is changing, but we're noticing some really interesting contrasts. For example, we live in an age when so much arrives at the press of a button. But at work, most of us are still putting up with clunky, outdated systems. Turns out, businesses are hungry to solve this problem.
So it got us thinking, who are the organizations out there who are bold enough to embrace this change? It's time to hear from them. Let's workflow it.
Let's workflow it. Hey, Alan, it's great to talk to you today.
Hey, Catherine, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm really excited for our show. You know, we have so many fascinating topics that we're covering this season, from digital music to the transformation of the automotive industry. But today, we get to dig into something that I think is on everyone's minds, which is vaccines. We're going to talk today with Derek Mitchelson. He heads up digital and security services for the National Health Service Scotland. In other words, he is responsible for an entire country. And in the age of COVID, I think that's a pretty big thing.
Oh, no question, Catherine. And here at ServiceNow, we see COVID and vaccination management as the greatest workflow challenge of our time. And it's going to be great to hear from Derek today about how Scotland's tackling the problem.
A little bit later, we'll hear from ServiceNow CEO Bill McDermott, a segment we call Dream Big with Bill. But first, let's get started. I'm so pleased to welcome Derek Mitchelson. Derek, welcome to Let's Workflow It.
Thank you very much. Absolutely delighted to be here. Looking forward to it.
Well, we are really excited to dive in. Just very, very big picture. What is NHS Scotland responsible for in general?
Yes, so NHS Scotland is the organisation that is tasked with providing healthcare. We tend to get involved in managing lots of the big national infrastructure programmes that go on, and obviously securing them and making sure that they're delivered in a safe, ethical and secure way for the citizens of Scotland.
If I could ask just, for you to go back to when you first learned about COVID, what went through your mind?
Yeah, like everyone else, I learned about COVID it was before we saw it on the news. Internally, we were starting to see intelligence around a SARS-like virus. But of course, there'd been a few of these that were that had been similar before. I guess avian bird flu being one. But we were just kind of watching these things. We had, in the NHS in Scotland, we very much had a response plan that we should be able to operate on the back of having a pandemic like we thought bird flu potentially was going to be, or SARS was actually going to be at the time. So, then started seeing things on the news where it was pretty apparent that this was something that was substantially bigger. And then it moved very quickly from there. It moved at such a pace, the pandemic, that we had to react digitally at the same pace, if not quicker, to try and be on the front foot. So that was very much what the challenge was.
So, Derek, you are at the center of the role technology plays in healthcare, and I know you've been behind two key efforts, contact tracing and vaccine management. Can you tell us more about, how you thought about those efforts and how you got them off the ground?
Yeah, the contact tracing was very much what the World Health Organization laid out. Contact tracing was exactly what they were suggesting that you should do. Part of the key to the contact tracing is not just being able to contact trace, but it's being able to actually make sense of the data, what the data and intelligence is actually telling you. And a big part of what we were trying to do with contact tracing was to push all that data into data science platforms so we could do predictive analytics, look at trends, look at themes, look at hotspots, etc., and provide that data back to Scottish Government so that Scottish Government could see where we getting on top of the virus or where we not. So, yeah, in the early days, a lot of this was trying to sell this back to Scottish Government, saying this is the right way of doing it. It's very much a healthcare response, but even still, we had to give them a level of confidence that going down this route was the right way to do it.
Why is data so critical to delivering healthcare at this scale?
I look on health data as the crown jewels. That's the most important data we've got in Scotland. The Community Health Index, or CHI, as we call it, that's a unique record that you get when you're born in Scotland. And every piece of medical information sits off the back of that. So in essence, we've got petabytes of data, and it will all link back to this CHI identifier that you get at birth. That means we can understand what's happening. It's absolutely critical to have all that data, but it's even bigger than that, Alan, because we need to understand, are there risks around certain locations? Have we got hotspots in locations? So the data is much bigger than even, I would say, health data. It's location data, transport data, etc. as well. It's telling you quite a lot.
It just shows what a daunting challenge you were facing and your team was facing. I know there are estimates that nearly half of the Scottish population, we're talking several million people, are classified as vulnerable. And so had you ever faced such a daunting task as this? And I know, Scotland, you've created the bold goal of vaccinating that group within 12 weeks.
I think everyone does look forward to what's going to break the cycle. Contact tracing can break cycles, but the next big challenge was how do we start to then build vaccination systems so that we can schedule people at Scotland at bulk. And that system has been scheduling appointments since the 22nd of February. We schedule about 22,500 appointments on average per day on that platform since it's gone live. The guidance very much has got the population separated into what they call cohorts, with the most vulnerable at the priority, and then we go down from their decrements till we get down to 17, 18-year-olds. So it's I don't think we have ever seen an operation quite as complex and run it as fast a pace as this, and this is very much what the challenge is. It's trying to deliver this at the right level.
And so, Derek, the intricacy of all of this seems so connected to vaccine supply. How do you manage both the government's expectations and the public's expectations?
The messaging very much from Scottish Government is we want to vaccinate as quickly as we can. That's how we get out of lockdown. Everyone wants to get vaccinated, but at times we're forward planning about 12 weeks, saying where we're going to be with vaccine supply at that point and how do we then schedule. You know, the analogy is you book your plane ticket, but I think the airlines nearly always know what planes they've got flying, what capacity they've got in the plane. You know, we're dependent on a third party to actually bring this supply and get our share of the UK supply, and then start to ship it around Scotland. It's very complex.
Well, congratulations on such extraordinary effort and great progress. And you've touched on how quickly you had to work to architect the technology and scale it. Can you tell us a little more about the role that the ServiceNow and the Now platform have played in this?
Yeah, absolutely. It was obvious for us that given the success of the contact tracing, that it made sense to put the vaccinations in the same Now platform. We had the integration with the data science platform, and we had the integration with the contact tracing stuff as well. The slight challenge with the vaccinations was that we didn't have an awful lot of expertise around scheduling. So it's fair to say we architected this as much as we could out the box using the walk-up appointment type functionality within ServiceNow. And we heavily relied on the ServiceNow engineering teams, that we've worked with teams across in the UK, in the Americas, India as well, to really bend as we needed to the platform in order to make this happen. And we got some last minute requirement changes that came out that really forced us to have a look at how we'd be able to use the Now platform. And it's ended up being quite different to how we started off envisaging we would use it. So we've ended up having to create, I think, quite a dynamic and flexible system that's definitely delivering and much more than we thought we'd be doing at the start of the programme, it's fair to say.
You know, here in the U.S., where the efforts are state by state and it feels incredibly complicated, even in a country like Scotland, where you've got a national health system, just hearing you talk about the complexities of that, it just helps underscore what a challenge this is for every country and every government agency around the world to do this quickly and make sure their citizens are healthy and safe.
In many ways, the challenges we've got in Scotland is we've got a population of 4 to 5 million that we're trying to vaccinate. there's a lot of that population sits across the central areas in Scotland, but when you go into the more rural, the Highland areas up in the north of Scotland, lots of distances and very little percentage of the population that sits in there. So the model's been, build them big within the central belt so we can push lots of people into these, what we call the mass vaccination centres. And then in the outlying areas, they've gone very much with a local type area whereby they've had a clinic open for one day, then a clinic in the next town or village open the next day. Some have had clinics in the mornings only. So it's that sort of variety across Scotland for the size of Scotland that has brought such a big challenge to this programme.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating logistical issue. I don't know if you know this, Derek, but in my previous life, I spent 6 months in 2010 rolling out vaccines across a couple different countries in East Africa. And so it's been fascinating to see all of the detailed logistics of vaccine rollout, cold storage, show up in sort of mainstream media, all of our consciousness. And then hearing things like family members in the United States refreshing, a US-based site 20 times at 3 a.m. in the morning, trying to get a vaccine appointment. I think, I guess it must feel pretty meaningful to be doing the work that you're doing, really at the center of, one of the biggest global issues probably of our lifetime.
Yeah, I think it is. It's a difficult one working in any sort of crisis. Crisis normally brings probably a special opportunity to do things differently, that you wouldn't do. What we have been keen to do, though, all the way through this is to make sure that when we come at the pandemic, we've got a legacy of systems that we can keep using. That's been critical for me, that data, contact tracing and scheduling systems, both things we'll use in the future.
Yeah, building for today and for tomorrow.
Yeah.
Well, Derek, I have to share with you, we have an employee with ServiceNow here in the Bay Area, and she's Scottish. She's from Fife, okay. And she has not seen her mom in over a year. Like everybody, she was quite concerned about her mom's health. And on Valentine's Day, her mom got the letter from NHS Scotland, got the appointment, and got vaccinated, and is feeling much healthier and safer now, thanks to you and your team and your efforts.
It does make it real, doesn't it? I think my wife talks about, not having a digital background or a security background. She's a veterinary surgeon, and as she says now, it's much easier for people to understand the role that I do and in effect how that role actually saves lives, which probably is not what I would use to describe what I do at the start of the pandemic, but it's certainly included as to what I talk about now. We've had within the 400 staff that work for me directly, we've had family members that within these that have been impacted by COVID, some fatally as well, unfortunately. So this is so important. It is the most important things that any of us can ever have done in our lifetime. It does give you that drive to, I think, push things and get them to a point where it's making that as big a difference as it can as quickly as possible. We still do get asked regularly questions from Scottish Government about can we go quicker? That's a regular question we ask. Can we go quicker? Can we accelerate what we're doing? And, the only way we can go quicker if somebody can find a magic vaccine supply somewhere or a magic fridge, with a cold storage somewhere that all the spare vaccines are, then we could potentially do that. But other than that, I think we've done everything we can, to be honest.
So, Derek, you're organizing so much data with these workflows. I mean, you're figuring out how to prioritize the most vulnerable through cohort identification, postal codes, other restrictions. What does that initial data gathering look like for your team?
The first workflow starts from what we call our cohort identification. We're able to actually pull data at real term dependent on several variables. And then from there, what we do is we pull that into what's called a consumer table within the Now platform. Consumer table is very much like a holding space that it lets us organise that data. It lets us check that data, provide that data to the health board so that they can validate it. It also means that we can use that data for things like modelling. So we're able to understand when we're setting up the vaccination clinics, how many clinics we need, how many vaccinators we need. If we break it down into the 10-minute appointment slots, what does that mean? How many appointments can we do per day, per clinic? So that allows us to do that modelling. Once we've done the modelling, we then set up the clinic locations within the Now platform itself. It's a very, very complex workflow. Some other parts of the NHS have actually built some other systems that then speak to this platform. We've got a vaccination management tool that one of our sister organisations have built, and that's used on a tablet. They use that at the time of vaccinating, and it pulls the ServiceNow record in, and then they can actually just check a few boxes, do some checks, and then the vaccine's actually administered, and then it closes the loop and puts it back into that database with the vaccination record.
Wow. In this podcast, we've been talking to a lot of different people about customer experience and how do you really be thoughtful about the overall experience you deliver to your end user. And frankly, it almost seems a little bit funny to ask about this in the context of healthcare, because obviously the delivery of the vaccine and the functioning of the system is the most important thing. But it sounds like you have been thinking about the patient experience or the user experience as well as you've designed this entire system, because it is a very anxiety-inducing time for a lot of people.
Yeah, we've got probably the most basic level is that, as I say, we split it down into these cohort groups so that we can prioritise who gets the vaccine first and what order they get the vaccine. But it also means that we can do some personalisation. We've got a particular group which is the unpaid carers in society, and that's the group that don't get recognised a lot of time. They maybe don't sit within one of these immediate priority groups, but they play that critical role, caring or looking after someone. It could be a family member, for example. So that's what we're looking to prioritise with this online portal that goes live on Monday. So they'll be getting a tailored experience that we've already run through user groups, consumer groups, ethical groups. So we know when they come online that they will actually get the same sort of prioritisation that we would expect if they were sitting within one of the standard cohort files. Users sit at the heart of everything.
Derek, I'm curious, this is such a profound experience. Are there ways in which you see it changing you as a leader and changing your team?
That's a good question. I mean, I think you do lead differently in a crisis. You optimise risk rather than probably mitigating risk. Crisis management helps you deliver things in a different way. You know, have I learned much about it? I think I've probably learned quite a lot about my team through doing this. You know, it's I've only been in the NHS just over 2 years. So after a year, we go into a pandemic, and it's fair to say I probably didn't know the capabilities of the team. And some of the questions I was getting asked from my executive colleagues in the NSS when we started this was, you know, are some of these things about risks? Should we be doing them? You know, reputationally, should we be going forward to say, yes, we're the right people to be leading this piece of work? You know, should we decide that we're going to build this on a platform, or would it be better going out and speaking to some of the big consultancy organisations, KPMG, Deloitte, or IBM, etc., just to say, come and build one of these things, bring it to us, and we'll use it. So I think there's a confidence thing in that as well, backing yourself, backing the team when you're leading in a crisis, to say that let's do things quickly. And if we've got confidence that we can do things in these spaces, I think to basically put your cards forward to say yes, and then back it, and then push forward with everything you've got. The COVID workflow challenges are the most complex that we've ever undertaken. I think we've been very innovative in the use of the technologies as well. It's probably using technologies that people probably were a bit surprised about when we're talking about building workflow systems within the Now platform. I know when I had the initial conversations with the Scottish Government around this is the way we want to go, you know, it was crystal clear that there was lots of questions coming back around, you know, isn't this an IT system, or isn't this a help desk system? But you're absolutely right. I always look on everything I do is breaking it down into simple workflow. We've built things like PPE systems within the Now platform, because it's just actually, again, managing data. What is the demand for PPE, and where can we get our PPE from? So can we marry up supply and demand and make sure we manage it so that the frontline doctors, nurses, consultants, etc., get that protective equipment that they need when they need it, rather than actually waiting to do it. Again, just another workflow thing. So it's I think the world's probably full of lots of these little workflow challenges, to be honest, Alan, and this just happens to be the one that is topping them all at the moment.
Well, it's such beautiful insight. One of the silver linings of any crisis is it inspires us to do things that we didn't think we could do, and that changes you as an individual forever and changes the culture of your team forever.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think everyone's done an amazing effort against this pandemic, but you do see some stars within the organisation that just absolutely step forward. And it's been fascinating for some people that I haven't worked with before, that I just see in a totally different way now. I think everyone should be looking to come out and say, I'm a better person because of it. I've got a more focused, outcome-driven slant on life because of it.
Terrific insight. And more broadly speaking, are you and other leaders starting to think about how technology can more broadly change healthcare in Scotland longer term?
Well, I certainly am. I mean, I always look a good 12 to 18 months forward to say, where do we want to be with things? It'd be great to have some proof of concepts around the portal we're building as in Portal is to potentially becoming this front door into health information, so that citizens in Scotland can actually log on and actually collaborate with practitioners, collaborate around appointments, getting test results, seeing the medical records, updating things. It'd be great to think that this is a legacy that we've delivered much more than a scheduling system, something that I think is going to be a real-time digital collaboration channel into your health records. That's ideally where we want to be.
I'm curious, somebody in your role, are you getting a lot of calls from your peer group and other countries and other organizations, or is there a lot of sharing going on right now of how are you doing this? How are you making it work?
There's certainly sharing within what we call the home nations in the UK. You know, absolutely, we've got regular catch-ups with counterparts around what we're doing, what some of the systems are, how we're tackling things. We've not all gone the same way, it's fair to say. I don't think it's been particularly collaborative internationally. I think that's definitely been a challenge when we move into looking at things like, for example, vaccination passports, so that it's allowing you to travel based on your vaccination record. That's going to have a lot more international participation. I think, if we're all going to have to trust everyone else's data, everyone else's smartphone applications as to how we do that, I think that's a potential minefield that without the right level of international collaboration, that I'm not quite sure how we join all that up. But lots of domestic collaboration. I don't think enough international. I do think that this is now all going to be about joining data up or joining workflows up. I think that's where the next big thing is going to be, to be honest. It is going to be all about standards, integration, interfaces. I think that's where I see this all going.
Yeah, it's really startling to me how just over a year ago, we could not fathom this future that we're living in. And now to look ahead and see this range of possibilities and how we approach problem solving, what's going to change. I mean, Derek, when you were a kid, did you think that this sort of big picture problem solving was going to be in your future?
Yeah, problem solving, probably have always enjoyed problems and challenges. It's as a youngster, I did enjoy technologies. That stemmed from probably playing a lot of the early video games that are the precursors to what's now the big consoles that people play. And these days, you had to get your hands dirty quite a lot into coding and programming in order to actually start to do some of these things. So I would say I was always quite scientific sort of background. I enjoyed understanding the science of problems, what these things actually meant. These things had to be quite, I think, tangible rather than run theoretical. And I think that's the type of person I always was. I was never sure where I was going to go into as a career when I left school. I started off thinking about perhaps accountancy or something, something that was very numeric based was the right way to go, but ended up leaving university doing joint accountancy and computer science, and then falling into that computer science point of view is what I did. But just this role's very much just fallen into place. I've never thought about going and working in healthcare, for example. Where to go with this next, I'll need to wait and see. But at the moment, I'm certainly enjoying it.
Well, I think you ended up in the right job at the right time, Derek.
Yeah, do you know what? I wouldn't want to be anywhere else at the moment. Absolutely not. I'm always one that never does say that, a job for me is probably never for life. I do quite like to get changes and different challenges. So I do quite enjoy working across different types of sectors and different types of organisations. It keeps me quite sharp, and the challenge is always fresh. But I must admit, I'm definitely in the right place at the right time.
Well, right place and right time indeed. Derek, you have given us quite a lot to think about. Thank you so much for joining us.
No, thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure. Love telling the story of what we've been doing around COVID response. As I say, it's an exciting time, even though we're delivering these things in a pandemic. So, it's absolutely my pleasure.
Derek, when you finish up in Scotland, we may need your help here in the U.S.
I was going to say, come save us. Come save us.
Great to talk with you. And to wrap up today, now it's time for our final segment, Dream Big with ServiceNow CEO Bill McDermott. Bill, great to have you here.
Thank you, Alan. Wonderful to be here.
Bill, rightfully so, there's been so much attention over the past year on developing the vaccine for COVID. But what people weren't thinking about was how you actually convert vaccines into vaccinations.
Absolutely, Alan. Clearly, COVID presented the world with one of its biggest challenges. And I've always believed that the world's biggest challenges are also its biggest opportunities. And COVID represented the single greatest workflow challenge of this generation.
No question. And NHS Scotland is such a vivid illustration of the need for workflows to address new business challenges. And with our platform, the Now platform, they were able to deploy vaccine management in weeks, not months. Can you talk about the importance of speed and time to value?
It's everything. I mean, today, the two, hyper trends for speed are moving various operational items to the cloud and gaining the cloud efficiency, but also truly revolutionizing, improving the applications in an enterprise, modernizing those applications. And what we find with the Now platform is, of course, it's in the cloud. And in terms of modernizing the applications, we're connecting everything from the IT systems to the employee experience systems to the customer experience systems. And we're also providing a platform where code can be navigated very quickly on a low code or a no code basis to create new applications to solve difficult challenges like vaccine management, as an example. And the big difference between ServiceNow and most every other enterprise software company is we solve problems in hours and days, sometimes weeks, not long, arduous months and years. So it is really the time to value equation that differentiates us.
No question. And Derek talks about how the experience is actually prompting them to rethink healthcare longer term and how they deliver healthcare and deliver great experiences to Scottish citizens. I know you see examples all over the world of how once people start understanding the power of workflow to deliver great experiences, it does lead to continuous innovation.
It really does. I mean, you look at the cost of healthcare as a percent of GDP in the world, and it's not sustainable. And if you don't change the process or the workflow, it'll only get worse. So we have to take learnings from COVID, whether it's in the corporate environment or the healthcare environment or any other industry, and truly recognize that we just can't do what we always did. Because if you always do what you always did, you'll always get what you always got. And that's not good enough. It's time for change.
And of course, in the example of NHS Scotland, nothing is more important than making people feel healthy and safe. And it was the experience that delivered that confidence. And when you think about that from a C-suite perspective in the business world, it is all about customer loyalty and employee engagement and creating the experiences that matter to drive that loyalty and drive that engagement.
100%, Alan. And it's the moments that matter. There are certain moments that really matter. The response to COVID and getting people their vaccination is a moment that really mattered. Governments that automate that value chain well, where the citizens felt very well cared for, will fare a lot better than the ones that didn't feel well led and well served by their public officials.
Well, thanks, Bill. It's always great to spend a few moments dreaming big with you. So until the next time, let's workflow it.
Thank you very much, Alan.
Join us next time as we uncover how business leaders are innovating to make work better. Let's workflow it together. Let's Workflow It is a production of ServiceNow and Slate Studios. You can find out more about Derek Mitchelson and the other guests in the series at slate.com/Let's Workflow It.